Hola putos. Welcome back to another one of these videos made by someone who just escaped the loony bin. As I said in my previous video, which you should check out, there is an increased interest in Creepypasta amongst the Steve Hive line. Granted, we've always had an interest, but it recently hit new heights, and I am no exception. The last video was about a Creepypasta character, the Supreme Judge from Maximum Judgment, who honestly isn't even that much of a creepypasta. And this video will be going over yet another creepypasta character that is known for his power. Granted, the story he originates from is much better than Maximum Judgment, is nowhere near as tier shitty, and the character in question can actually be argued to be impressive. Today I'll be covering the Chronokeeper from the Library of Eternity. There isn't anything I need to prefix this video with besides the fact that I'm only going off the original tale, so we can just dive into the ADHD Precap and Powerscaling. As I said in my previous video, I will now be leaving a little precap for the contents of my videos for now on. Some people just want to know where the character lands, and I figured appealing to that mindset would be good for me and the viewer. At minimum, the Chronokeeper can be said to reach high 3-A universe level. However, the ending of the story gives us a particular line that can give the Chronokeeper one of three possible tiers: universe level plus, low complex multiversal, or just straight up outerversal, depending on interpretation. Alongside this, he has immeasurable speed, or irrelevant speed if you go with the outerversal interpretation, along with abilities like existence erasure and non-existent physiology. So yeah, we are in for some shit today. Most of the original story actually doesn't talk about the Chronokeeper, rather it talks about the library itself and how you can enter it. It's the ending paragraph where the Chronokeeper is finally talked about in detail, and it gives us quite a bit to work with. Among other things that will be talked about later, the Chronokeeper is said to be the embodiment of the Library of Eternity. The library, as the name bluntly implies, is a realm that is infinitely large, containing several bookshelves that are endlessly long and each contain an infinite amount of books. This would mean the Chronokeeper embodies, so in general, is one with a structure that is equivalent to an infinite-sized universe. We aren't given much on the nature of the library, most relevant being if it has spatial dimensions beyond the typical 3 we exist in. So this would put the Chronokeeper at high 3-A or high universe level, the tier for characters who have an infinite amount of 3-dimensional power, and is typically achieved when all the matter in a universe that is infinite sized is destroyed. However, as I said before, he can be argued to be much higher than this, which is where the rest of the paragraph comes into play. The Chronokeeper is said to live at the quote-unquote impossible end of infinity, and from this special vantage point he observes everything in existence, all time periods, dimensions, physical realms, and even minds. This is an extremely interesting statement that requires a little dissection, mainly on what dimension means here and the nature of this end of infinity. Dimension is a term that can mean a number of things, and what exactly is being referenced here completely changes the scaling. Dimension can either be referring to spatial dimensions, the things that make a square 2D, a cube 3D, or a tesseract 4D, or it could be referring to like universes or alternate realities that don't necessarily have any dimensional superiority over our world. These are very different things, and one has far bigger ramifications of power scaling, so it is crucial to determine which one of these kinds of dimensions are being referred to here. In the case of the Chronokeeper, we can actually determine that dimension here isn't just referring to universes, as something like universes would be covered by physical realms, a term used separately from dimensions here. So spatial dimensions, the things that make a cube 3D and whatnot, are likely being referred to here. I could explain how having four or more spatial dimensions to your being is impressive using real life scientific theories, but that is a complete waste of time. To be perfectly honest with you, most fictional verses treat spatial dimension in a really simplistic manner that just equates to a thing being vaguely transcendent. Fictional spatial dimensions are somewhat based on our real life scientific understanding of dimensionality, but is in an extremely minimal and loose manner to the point that they should be considered their own things. Just know that, for instance, a fourth dimensional entity would be infinitely above any and all three dimensional things, because no matter how, no, because no amount of three dimensional things, even if you like stack infinities on top of each other, like stack infinities of 3D shit, it would not suddenly equate to fourth dimensional. The difference would be the same for any amount of spatial dimensions further than that. Back to the Chronokeeper. Now, let's go over what this end of infinity entails. From this end of infinity, the Chronokeeper is capable of seeing all of existence, all its realms, dimensions, and time periods. This would suggest that this end of infinity isn't a literal end to existence, like some final or infinite layer of existence. Rather, it is totally separate and beyond it. This would also mean that he shouldn't be bound to any of its qualities either, which the Library of Eternity is actually indicative of, with it being described as timeless, as in the quality of time is just entirely absent. So basically, the Chronokeeper would transcend the world depicted in the story, which includes, quote unquote, all dimensions. There are two ways that this can be taken. Either A, the Chronokeeper exists beyond any and all spatial dimensions, or B, the Chronokeeper exists beyond the spatial dimensions that have been previously established to exist in the story. If we go with interpretation A, that would mean the Chronokeeper is 1-A or outerversal, as he exists beyond the concept of dimensionality entirely. This kind of transcendence would be a qualitative superiority, which I have a blog that goes over this concept rather well, which you can find in the description if you want to read up on the full details. The short answer is that the Chronokeeper exists in such a far off state that you simply cannot reach it with spatial dimensions. No matter how many spatial dimensions you stack on top of yourself, even if you have like an inaccessible cardinal's worth of spatial dimensions and then multiply that by another inaccessible cardinal or anything more than that, you would not reach this state as it is still a certain amount of dimensions. So that's it. The Chronokeeper is outerversal, right? Well, not so fast, as that is where the second interpretation comes into play. Interpretation B. That being, he merely exists above the previously established dimensional layers, which is the much safer and reasonable interpretation because it doesn't assume the verse encompasses all spatial dimensions, unlike the previous interpretation. But this does make him much, much weaker, as the story never establishes the existence of higher dimensions beyond the standard three that us humans exist in. So this would drop the Chronokeeper all the way down to just being fourth dimensional, or universal plus the tier 4 fourth dimensional things, and is most often achieved when destroying something like a timeline or a space-time continuum. However, if neither of these tickle your fancy, there is another way to use this statement. One of the many things the Chronokeeper exists beyond is quote-unquote time periods, and you can equate this to him being transcended to something like timelines, fourth dimensional constructs. This would leave him at low complex multiverse level, the tier for fifth dimensional shit. There isn't much to talk about here in terms of speed. Most of the logic behind it has already been explained above with him transcending everything. As said before, this includes all time periods, which naturally equates to him existing beyond time, which should give the Chronokeeper immeasurable speed. In power scaling, there are a few accepted tier levels of speed that go beyond any finite measurements. far beyond any times faster than the speed of light. There are four in total. First, there is infinite, which are characters that can travel across an infinite distance. If Superman, for example, was able to travel from one quote unquote end of the universe to the other, and this universe is infinite size, then he would have infinite speed. How this is superior to finite speed scaling should be obvious. Secondly, above infinite is inaccessible, which is for characters that can move in zero time. This is in a literal sense, not the hyperbolic way like that most characters, like a character moving so fast that they appeared somewhere quote unquote instantly. If a character is able to move in a place where time is frozen or is entirely absent, then they would have inaccessible speed. This is superior to infinite speed because infinite speed characters still require a set amount of time in order for them to move, unlike characters of this caliber. Sure, this amount of time is very teeny tiny at times, but it's still greater than zero. Thirdly, and most relevant here, is immeasurable speed. Immeasurable speed is for characters that are so fast that they aren't bound by linear time, which typically translates to them being able to travel through time by raw speed, or can move in places that fundamentally transcend time. This is superior to inaccessible speed because a character that can move and stop or zero time isn't necessarily beyond it like an immeasurable speed character, and this level of speed breaks the speed formula unlike the other two. To put it in a simple analogy, think of infinite speed as infinity, inaccessible speed as the number zero, and immeasurable speed as a negative number, and try to implement them into the speed formula. We can still put infinity and zero into the speed formula and come up with results like 3 times infinity is still infinity and 3 times 0 equates to 0. However, if you put a negative number into the time part of the speed formula, you don't get any results because it is fundamentally impossible to calculate the speed of anything traveling somewhere in negative seconds. The final speed tier is irrelevant speed. Irrelevant speed is for characters that are so fast that the very concept of speed itself isn't applicable to them. Their speed is literally beyond the general idea of the speed formula, which is speed equals distance over time. This level of speed is mainly achieved when the character is beyond the concept of space-time or can move in places of the same nature. As time and space, the latter encompassing distance, are the key components to speed. Concept, quote unquote, here isn't referring to a thought or idea in someone's head. Rather, it refers to some kind of fundamental rule or force that makes something possible to occur in existence and should encompass all aspects of that particular thing. Irrelevant speed is above all the other speed tiers I've covered because while they may break in some areas and differ from traditional speed calculating, they could still be explained using the speed formula. But with irrelevant speed, you can't do that at all, as the concepts of speed and distance themselves are inapplicable, therefore making the speed formula irrelevant. As I said before, the Chronokeeper most likely has immeasurable speed, but if you don't think he is transcendent to time for whatever reason, he would be inaccessible. But if you think if he is like out of reversal, like even agree with interpretation A from before, you could have him at irrelevant speed. The most interesting ability of the Chronokeeper is his non-existent physiology. Versus Bowswiki defines the ability rather well, defining it as an ability for characters that paradoxically quote unquote exists despite lacking certain aspects that would be crucial to exist. Like you would need to exist. Despite what the name might imply, this isn't for characters that just don't exist, like we just made them up. But rather like if a character lacks a soul in the similar sense that a rock lacks a soul, that kind of thing. Both the Chronokeeper and the place where he resides are described as being non existent, and not only that, is in reference to beings that reside in the Library of Eternity. This is interesting because those who live in the Library of Eternity had to sacrifice their existence in order to enter it, being erased from the physical world so completely that no traces of them can be found and they aren't even remembered by anyone. This would mean that the inhabitants of the library qualify for Type 1 non existent physiology, and the Chronokeeper is non existent even in comparison to them, which I think would mean he would have Type 2 non existent physiology, which is about as untouchable as you can get in power scaling. Also, as just said, people inside the Library of Eternity get erased from existence. Like they had to get erased in order to enter it. This is caused by the library itself, and given he embodies it, the Chronokeeper should also be able to erase people. This erasure is so thorough that zero traces of the person can be found, even within the memories of people that once knew them, effectively erasing them from history. A level of erasure only that not only goes beyond just erasing your physical body, but also your mind and soul, with only things like conceptual or narrative erasure being above it. For the final stats, there is a lot to break down. At absolute minimum, the Chronokeeper would be high universal, basically meaning he can destroy all the physical matter within infinite universe, but he can be interpreted to be universal plus, meaning he can destroy space-time continuum or timeline. Low complex multiversal, meaning he would be infinitely above any character that can destroy an infinite amount of space-time continuums or timelines. And lastly, outerversal, the funny Saitama tier. That means he is beyond any and all possible extensions of dimensionality. All of this alongside speed that can be either immeasurable or irrelevant depending on which of these tiers you accept him at. Along with non-existent physiology and the ability to erase your body, mind, soul, and history. So yeah, quite an upgrade from the Supreme Judge, both in writing and in power scaling, despite the author of Maximum Judgment writing it specifically for the purpose of making the judge powerful. You can argue this guy to be universal without any word of God statements or tales written by other authors, which can't be said for the Supreme Judge or really the vast majority of Creepypasta entities. Even without the universal stuff, he would still be decently powerful and somewhat deserving of its recognition. Anywho, that'll be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, or at least learned something from it. If you want to see everything I have on the Chronokeeper, along with other stuff, along with like the original tale, they're all linked in the description. Like I have a profile on the Chronokeeper. You can find that down there. And you find all sorts of other shit made by the other Steve Hive Minds. Hive Mind members like Headless or Goji. Anyway, that'll be it for today. See you fuckers later.